The biochemist gazed apprehensively at the pipette containing a processed liquid sample of the red dirt, which had previously been determined to be contaminated with blood. Sitting on the table in front of her were two beakers, each containing identical solutions of buffered enzymes and antigens. "Let's get this over with," she thought to herself, before squeezing her fingers to squirt the sample into the first beaker. The sample penetrated the fluid, and Lucy waited with suspense as she imagined the components of the solution interacting with the blood from the sample. If the pool of blood that created the stain in the dirt was that of a human, then the antigens would bind and produce a color change in the solution. The police would have to get involved, which meant that Carl and the other harvesters would lose time to cooperating with the investigation while protecting the cheddar vines. In the worst-case scenario, journalists that didn't mind stretching the truth would claim that the blood stain touched the vines themselves, and that the plants that were so carefully raised were unclean. Moments later, however, Miss Faraday returned to reality, and realized that the solution had been silent, and lacked the expected color change, as if wondering why this young scientist was trying to stare into its soul. The biochemist's expression slowly transitioned from worry to relief. Fortunately, this continued to be the case after she conducted a second trial on the adjacent beaker. While this did mean that the blood was most likely of the animal variety, that still didn't explain why there was such a pool in the first place, let alone why no body was left behind. It was then that an earlier conversation with Mr. Solon popped into mind. "I'm guessing that was one of the hunters patrolling. You know, the ones controlling the population of those elks invading the farms nearby. Why do you ask?" Recalling the hunter she'd heard leaving the site, as well as the reports of invasive herbivores, the event that had passed suddenly seemed to make sense. Whether the animal found their garden by chance, or was chased there by said hunter, a common hunch seemed to be a simple explanation to the blood stain, the non-human nature of said blood, and the lack of a body. The biochemist felt a hint of relief, and then suddenly realized, "Hey, wait a minute! That darn hunter was trespassing!" "Oh yeah? Sounds like trouble. Who are you talking to, by the way?" Miss Faraday was caught off guard by the voice, quickly turning around to find her boss that had just walked in. "Oh, Mr. Proctor, you have the strangest timing." The man responded with a light chuckle, listening as Lucy explained the results of her analysis and her hypothesis. John Proctor summarized. "So, you're saying that we had both an elk and a hunter on the property?" He sighed, continuing. "I told those men to put up a fence. You know, as paranoid as Mr. Solon is, he wouldn't even hire somebody to build one, insisting on building it himself because that's the only person he trusts. Of course he doesn't have time for that, much less to turn in his progress reports on time." "Oh, I'm sorry, Lucy. Didn't mean to ramble." Miss Faraday nodded her head and responded, "Oh, not at all, sir. I have to admit, I actually thought we had a murder mystery on our hands." John Proctor reacted with a curious expression, recognizing that it indeed would have been a serious matter. He said to her worries, "Well, I'm glad we didn't have that on our plate. However, we're not out of the woods yet, no pun intended. If you could help around with the inspecting the garden again, I'm sure Mr. Solon would have enough time to get building. Then he'd have to do it, and then we could all move on with our lives." The last time Lucy was told to visit the garden, she looked forward to the excursion. However, it seemed strange to have her set aside her laboratory work a second time to assist with the situation. Fortunately, Lucy Farady was not some expendable employee with reason to believe she was being delegated to non-laboratory duties. Having gained the trust of her colleagues and employer over the years, it was obvious that she was specifically chosen for her expertise in botany, and that its priority over her lab work was proof of how important it was to secure this garden. 50 minutes later, Miss Faraday was once again traveling down the road to the garden. Watching the road attentively, she found a lone jeep parked just off the path. Oh, that must be one of the harvesters, she thought. She actually planned on parking even closer to the garden, but decided on a whim to follow suit and began slowing down to a stop. Stepping out in her khaki clothes just as before, she listened to the sounds of the forest as she moved toward her assignment. The calls of insects and even a few birds could be heard in the distance. Before she knew it, she could already make out the sounds of the other harvesters. She quickened her pace as her legs brushed through the tall grass, but as she approached the voice's origin, she instead came upon a clearing with two men focused in the opposite direction. Upon closer inspection, their clothing appeared to consist of camouflage jackets and pants. Even more noteworthy, however, was the unmistakable fact that they were armed with rifles. The scientist instinctively flinched at the sight of the weapons. Nevertheless, she tried to keep in mind that the hunters were indeed doing a service in protecting the local farmers from the recent attacks. She just wished she knew why the creatures were uncharacteristically attacking in the first place. While she was contemplating this, one of the hunters started looking to the left and right, correctly thinking that he heard the arrival of something or someone living. Lucy's eyes widened, her legs starting to tremble as she realized that she might have attracted unwanted attention. Should I say something? She brainstormed. She tentatively opened her lips, but the hunters seemed to calm down and speak amongst themselves before she was able to utter a word. Hey bro, I've been meaning to tell you something. You know that elk we picked up the other day? Well, I've been thinking about the plant it was feeding on. I've seen him feeding on another plant just like it, and then start sprinting with a fire intercept for no reason. What if that's what making them so dang hard to catch? The other hunter listened with a skeptical countenance, thinking it could be any number of reasons. He responded, I don't know if it's just that, but we did see it happen twice in an area with spotted vines like those. Contrary to popular belief, hunting wasn't as simple as taking aim and pulling the trigger. It was common for them to stalk their prey, paying close attention to their behavior patterns to ensure an accurate shot. Unlike these observant brothers who were calmly speculating about their game, Lucy's eyes were widening to the point of strain. We were right? And just how much do these guys know? Who do they think they are, walking into our garden like it's nothing, talking about our plants? And where else did they find cheddar vines? Giving more thought to their observations, she slowly realized an uncomfortable possibility. It seemed like they had found the isolated grove where she famously discovered the cheddar vines in the first place. At this point, Miss Faraday was too upset to think about revealing herself. And even if she did, then she'd have to explain eavesdropping on a conversation indirectly concerning her fellow scientists. But even if you're right, what about it? Asked the second hunter. The elder brother responded, Well, if we get rid of the plants, we make him easy to catch again. That's what it's about. The mere suggestion of that idea made Lucy's heart sink as she listened on. Were they going to uproot what had made 2 years of research and successful animal testing possible? Sure, they still had the artificial garden where the harvesters were raising them, but if anything went wrong there, then they'd be lost. I've heard enough. I have to get out of here. Secure our vines. Protect the origin. But for the moment, getting away from these hunters on notice. You could not exaggerate how slowly her body moved and turned, rotating her neck to get a peripheral view behind her, lifting her leg as her eyes scanned the soil for a twig that would give away her position if she stepped on it. While she saw these brothers as being totally inconsiderate towards these rare plants, their keen observation skills and deductive talents did not go unnoticed by her. Clearly, she was dealing with experts, which made her all the more nervous that she would be heard. Minutes later, even beyond the range of the hunter's earshot, Lucy was at the edge of her nerves, creeping toward her garden. At last, she silently entered the safety of the garden, meeting the familiar faces of the workers now reacting to her fearful expression. She watched as Carl Solon waved to her, slowly joining the others' reactions and asking her what the problem was. Miss Faraday sighed, knowing that there was probably no good way to break it to him that the original vines were in danger.